Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by the Union Capital Corporation and Natel's Air Conditioning and Heating, a proud sponsor of the St. Jude Dream Home.
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to the Carnival edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we'll do as we always do. We'll talk a lot about what's going on with the home teams, the New Orleans Saints, the New Orleans Pelicans. And if we got some time, we're going to touch on college basketball, a little bit of March Madness. As always, we got a fantastic panel for you tonight. Ken Trahan of SportsNola.com and so much else. We'll let him tell you everything he's involved in. And also Terrence Harris of NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us. Thanks for coming down. And Kenny, we'll start with you because, again, I've often said, you and I have known each other for a long time. Yeah. I don't know when you sleep. You're in so many different things. Tell the audience a little bit about what you have going.
Yeah, sleep's overrated. It's a rumor. And thanks for having me. It's great to be with you, Eric. Well, of course, SportsNola.com as the president and general manager and CAO. It's been a fun ride for 6 years and really good people, and we've thoroughly enjoyed bringing a journalistic element to that particular discipline. There's very little of that around these days. And then from the perspective of radio, still doing WGSO, doing sports talk 4 times a week, doing many games there as well for the station as I have for many years. Then the Saints Hall of Fame, running the Saints Hall of Fame as the general manager and chairman of the board as I have since 1988, since the inception of the museum. Running Life Resources Sports Ministries, writing columns for the Kenner Star and the West Bank Beacon, and doing games for Loyola, and doing games for WHNO, and beyond that, I've got nothing to do.
Yeah, rarely sleep. And guys, he won't say it, but I've checked this out. The longest running sports radio show in New Orleans radio, the Three Tailgaters, each and every Saturday morning on WGSO 990 AM at 10 o'clock with Ed Daniels and the coach now. Coach has jumped in.
Rick Gailey, Archie's still with us once a month, but Rick Gailey is on weekly, and Rick brings tremendous analysis and thought to the process. He has about 20 pages of notes for each show and uses about 1. Yeah,
and I'll tell you what, he's good. We had him on the show before. He's done a great job. Terrence Harris joins us from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. And Terrence, welcome. Welcome to New Orleans. Tell us a little bit about your background and, of course, what you're doing with NOLA.com.
Well, thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me. And I'd like to say right off the rip, I mean, you know, listening to Ken here, I kind of feel like I don't do a whole lot. You know,
you do great. Join the club.
You know, because, I mean, that's a whole lot.
Yeah, it is. But, that's a resume.
Yes. But I'm the enterprise reporter, a sports reporter for NOLA.com. And with that, I mean, and I'm their special projects reporter as well. So with that, I cover all of their major events, whether it be the Super Bowl, Final Four, the NBA All-Star Weekend that just left. I'm like their lead reporter on those big events. And as an enterprise person, I mean, obviously I write some of the bigger, longer special features that we do. I spend a lot of time out with the Saints, with the Pelicans, do some stuff with LSU as well. So I'm kind of all over the place really with them, and it's a fun job though. It's a great opportunity.
A native of Cleveland, Ohio.
Yes, sir.
And came to us from Houston, Texas, right?
Yes, indeed.
You were with the Chronicle for a while there.
Yes, I was with the Chronicle for a while. I was with AOL Fan House for a while as well. So yes.
Well, welcome to New Orleans.
Thank you very much.
Let's get started with the Saints. Of course, Kenny, you know this from being around, being a native New Orleanian. And Terrence, if you don't know it, you'll know it. It's Saints year-round here in New Orleans.
Yes.
There's never an off-season for this team. And even though they're in the off-season right now, really got some good news over the last couple of days. It looked like the cap was going to go up 5% from about $123 million to about $130. It was reported over the weekend by John Clayton. It looks like it's going to be $132 million. That gives the Saints around about $7.1 million under the cap right now. When you start looking at where they are, to me, and I've talked about this before, they're kind of in a transition period right now. You know, they've gotten younger on defense. They obviously got to fill some holes on the defensive side with the departure of some of their veteran guys. But on offense, they're kind of in that transition going forward, in my opinion, this year. This is kind of the year where they've got to kind of get a little bit younger on the offensive side. First of all, Kenny, I'll take you first. what Mickey Loomis has to deal with to obviously get the players he needs to get under contract, maybe dab a little bit in free agency, and then ultimately obviously sign his draft choices as well. $132 million is a lot better than 126, but he still got some work to do.
It's more than a drop in the bucket. It's more like about 3 drops, but still nothing significant, and it was not unexpected from the standpoint of what happened in terms of how it went up to that particular level. It's incremental on a pretty much an annual basis. From the standpoint of what they need to do, listen, if they can replicate what they did last offseason, they'll be in tremendous shape. You go out and get one ticket free agent that's not a high-priced guy, maybe got a hometown discount with Keenan Lewis, who's a very good player. You're not going to hit gold and find a great player in free agency. And most of the time, as has been proven, when you try to do that and you overspend, it's colossal in terms of the failure aspect of it. So if you can find one guy like that in particular and draft well again, as they did last year, they're in good shape. Listen, right now they're the 3rd best team in the NFC, and they're a competitive 3rd. But in this league, as we know, with the way it's structured, there's 5 or 6 gaining on you. So you can't have a bad offseason. You've got to have a good one, and I think they are set up to do so.
Yeah, I would agree. Terrence, your thoughts? Again, there was some good news, obviously. Maybe it saved at least one job on this team for a veteran by seeing those cap numbers expand.
Yeah, definitely. And we're even hearing that it could expand even a little bit higher than that, perhaps to 135.
Wow, which would be incredible.
It would be incredible. So, yeah, so so with that, they do have some flexibility. But once again, with you having to do so much, I mean, you got your draft picks that you need to sign. I mean, you want to look at some free agents. I mean, you want to look at, maybe, you definitely need some type of receiver, some type of game-breaking type receiver. I'm not sure who's really out there at this point, but, they need to look at who, at maybe a game-breaking receiver. They also perhaps need to maybe look at a left tackle situation, because that left tackle situation I still think is a little bit uneasy. So they have some things that they may want to address offensively, and it'll be interesting. I mean, right now you're looking at what will they do, like with Pierre Thomas. I mean, he could end up being a casualty. Although when you look at his cap number just isn't horrible. So I don't really quite understand the angst there, because you're talking $2.9 million, right, and for what he does for you, I think that he's still a bargain.
I still think he's the best all-around back on this team.
Yes.
There were reports this week that the Saints were looking to try to extend his deal, make it more of a cap-friendly deal. Kenny, when you look at some of the needs on this team going into free agency, it's a little bit different now. You pretty much set your team up in free agency, sign your guys, and then go into the draft and finish off your team with young players. What do you think some of the needs on this team are?
Well, I think it's all dependent on what they do in free agency prior to the draft, first and foremost. But secondly, from the standpoint of their biggest need, they need a cornerback. It's no different than last year. Keenan Lewis filled a tremendous need. Now they need somebody on the other side. Patrick Robinson is coming off of a serious injury, and the jury was somewhat out on him anyway. And, of course, Jabari Greer has been released, and even if they were to consider re-signing him at a smaller rate, well, he's not going to be ready to play by the start of the season. So I think that theory is probably a minimal one at best. And then, of course, what else they have on the roster right now from what we saw last year really isn't what you want to play with, at least on the front end side. So I think that's their biggest need from my perspective. From the wide receiver perspective, they may think they have that guy in Joe Morgan, because we saw that for the 2 years previous with his downhill speed, which was second to none. He was one of the 5 fastest players in the NFL, and of course he missed the entire year last year. If he comes back healthy, he has that top-end speed very clearly to stretch the field. Whether he can be a top-end receiver is another story.
As far as his cap number, the Saints are kind of leery at tendering him. I think it's about $1.7 million, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
They'd like to get into a situation where they can sign him to maybe a couple-year deal, where they don't have to put that much money into him, and then ultimately it hurts you at another spot.
It certainly does, and I think the running back position, as Terrence mentioned, is one that is going to be addressed. Even though they're getting a little bit more of a break from the cap, they're still going to have to make some moves. They're going to have to release a couple of guys. And I think running back is a primary place to look at. I think whether it's Pierre, do not rule out Mark Ingram, and certainly keep an eye on Darren Sproles. He's getting a little long in the tooth at this stage. And I agree, Pierre Thomas is the most versatile back that you have, but he might be a victim of being one of those jack-of-all-trades,
yes,
master-of-nothing type of guys. Yeah. Great in the screen game, nice one-cut runner, and certainly an effective pass blocker, maybe the guy they can trust the most in that capacity. But they're going to have to make a move with somebody, and maybe the guy that's younger gets the nod in terms of sticking around.
Yeah. Terrence, what can you add?
Well, see, now in my mind, I mean, like, I think Mark Ingram, I mean, I know he's had his struggles, but I mean, I think that he's too valuable, and I think that, you know, the last thing you want is to let him go too early and he goes somewhere else and just completely blossoms. And at times he's looked like he's on the way, you know, there. I mean, I could see how Pierre Thomas could be the guy that they target. I mean, just because, like I said, like you were just saying, I mean, you know, he's a guy that's good at a lot of things but not great at any one thing. And I think that's the problem you look at with him. I like Kyrie. I think Kyrie's going to be, you know, a really good player. And he right now, he doesn't cost you anything. So there would be no need to, no reason to move him. Sproles, I mean, I think that, you know, he still brings so much to the table. I mean, and I think that he still has a little bit left. I mean, you don't want to give up on him. He really makes that offense go. He opens up a lot of things for Jimmy Graham and some of the other guys because of some of his versatility and the attention he requires, especially in the screen game and close around the line of scrimmage. So, you know, with him, I just feel like, you know, maybe Pierre is the guy, unfortunately, but you really would hate to lose Pierre.
One of the reasons that Ingram could be considered to be a casualty is twofold. Number one, because the guy that Terrence mentioned, Kyrie Robinson, has the ability from the Saints' perspective, and talking to coaches and front office people as I have, they believe he can be that first and second down guy. He has that ability. And secondly, the last impression you have of Mark Ingram is that he basically cost you the game in Seattle. Drops a screen pass on third down that would have gone for at least 15 yards into the wind, opening series of the game, and then, of course, fumbles the ball away in the second quarter and just gives the game away. So those things can't happen. You know, if you want to play in this league, he's not a good enough pure running back. He does not run through tackles. He doesn't have good vision. He's a strong guy that might get better as the game goes along. He's a competent player. Certainly wasn't worth the investment, but that's not his fault.
You know, I'm of the opinion that it may be Darren Sproles, and I don't think a cut, but asked to be to restructure his deal.
Right.
That may be something on the line. I do like what they're doing right now, as they are rumored to be, and you thought they would do it. That if they're going to keep Pierre around, and because he is probably the best all-around player. And you know, guys, I've said this before. I'm of the opinion they've kind of lengthened Pierre's career in the way where they've utilized him. You know, not really putting a lot of pressure on him, allowing him to be kind of one of three backs to be able to play. Looking at that, more than likely, he's a guy to me that may restructure it and they may be able to keep him around. But you know, they've got to look at what's going on with Darren Sproles as well. Not the same guy he was in the return game. It's something they got to look at when they go into the draft. It's something they really have to figure out. And again, not the same player that he was in terms of the screen game as well. A guy that has diminishing skills, but still brings a lot to the table with this team at the right price.
Definitely. And then you got to think about this. I mean, how many teams in the NFL right now are carrying 4 running backs during the season?
That don't run the football.
Yeah, I mean, that's just unheard of. I mean, so you're going to have to make a tough decision somewhere at one of those positions. I mean, you know, and whether it be Sproles, I mean, because the thing is, maybe Sproles isn't giving you quite what you want at the special teams level at this point, but do you have anyone that's there capable of replacing him at this point? I mean, that's the key. But you can find that in the draft, too.
Yes, you could. When you look at the big issue right now, and it has been since the season ended, it's Jimmy Graham and what they're going to do with Jimmy Graham. Are they going to tender him, as we believe they are, as a tight end? And I fully expect he goes to arbitration from there. He wants to be paid as one of the top receivers. More than likely, he's going to be paid as one of the top tight ends. I've talked about it on my radio show. Kenny, I know that you've talked about it as well. You look at Gronk's numbers right now, $9 million a year, 13.1 guaranteed. You look at Dwayne Bowe, who's about the 5th paid wide receiver in the NFL, $11.2 million. He's got $20 million guaranteed. And then Brandon Marshall's $11.1 million, 12.5 guaranteed. You know, you figure the number is going to be somewhere between 10.5 and 11.5 million a year, and you know, it's probably somewhere about 13, 14 million guaranteed. Probably 14 million guaranteed for Jimmy Graham, but they've got to get him under the fold early, because if not, if they have to put that tag on him, don't get a cap-friendly deal, it hurts them in free agency. It
does, but he'll be a Saint. That's all that really matters.
Agreed.
Ultimately. And the other thing that you mentioned makes sense. What you ultimately look at are Rob Gronkowski's numbers, because Jimmy Graham wants to be the highest paid tight end in the league, regardless of what his agent is posturing him as. If you want to play that game, let's play this game. Rick Gailey did a study on my website at sportsnola.com. Over the last 4 games of the season and into the playoffs, Jimmy Graham was on the field 52% of the time. So he wants to make the argument that he's a wide receiver, He's not even on the field for half the plays that this team runs. So if you want to talk about value, you can get into that. And that's not demeaning him at all. He's a special player and a tremendous talent. And there's no question he'll be irked if the tag is slapped on him, which I fully expect will happen. But at the same time, as Ed Daniels wrote, it's simple. This is being over-dramatized. It's being talked about and bandied about way too much. He's going to be a Saint. Ultimately, he'll get his money. And he's smart enough to know he's in a good situation with a very good team where he's got a quarterback that's going to get him the ball.
Yeah, I would agree. Terrence, what can you add about Jimmy Graham? What you think that how he ultimately will be played, and what type of player he's been for this team?
Well, he's been a phenomenal player. I mean, he's a game-changing type player without question. But, as Ken just said, I mean, you do have to question, some of what happened toward the end of this past season when he did seem to kind of fade a little bit, especially when they needed him, and they didn't use him as much. I mean, but I think that also we all have to keep in mind that he is still a young player. So he's developing. I mean, this guy is going to get better. He's going to be a phenomenal star. When you start talking about though paying a tight end $10.5, maybe $11 million a season, I just think that that's a really high number. But it is kind of where the market is. I mean, and I still don't know if I had to make a decision between him and Gronk right now, I'm still going with Gronk. I think Gronk is still a better, more cagier tight end who really understands the game, and barring the injuries that have obviously plagued him. Yes. But when he's healthy, everything's equal. I think he's still going to give you a little bit more than what Jimmy's capable of giving you, so young, so early in his career. But Jimmy does have, he has great upside. You don't want to lose him. You don't want to lose him in any way, shape, or form. So you have to do what you have to do. And if it comes down to, to putting the tag on him, so be it. But you hope that those two sides can kind of come together. I think to me, it's sort of ridiculous for him to say, I want to be paid as a wide receiver, though. I don't see that.
I don't either. And ultimately, again, for the player, he doesn't care. He's looking to get as much money as he can, as much money as he can guaranteed, because he knows all he's have to do is look at his teammates and see what's happening in terms of when you get a little bit older, if something happens to you. But, there are some question marks. Some people laugh and scoff at his inability as a blocker. Well, it does hurt you when you have a guy that's really kind of one-dimensional. But again, he's a great pass catcher, a great weapon. Injury prone. He does get injuries at times, and when he gets injured, he's maybe not as strong of a player as he is when obviously he's healthy. Right. Those are some questions that need to be answered, but there's no doubt this team will not go forward without Jimmy Graham. He's going to be on this team.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Guys, do you see them tagging him, or do you see a long-term deal being worked out? I'm of the opinion it's so close, he'll probably be tagged, and it'll be much like what happened with Drew Brees. They'll tag him, they'll work out the deal by the summer.
That's what I think is going to occur, primarily because of the finances and what they have to spend, or better stated, what they don't have to spend. So I think that's exactly what's going to happen. If they do work out a long-term deal, fantastic, but I do not expect that to happen.
See, I think that they run into a little bit of a problem. Like with Drew, if I remember correctly, Drew's situation was a little bit different in that they weren't really doing a lot of the off-season stuff, so it wasn't that big a deal. This guy is too important to what they need to do during the off-season to get better. So you don't need to really be playing around with this in July and August. You really need to try to get this hammered out in the next couple months. So I would look for Loomis and those guys to kind of look at this and say, hey, we're not going to play with you guys real long. We'll negotiate with you. And if everybody's realistic, we can get this done. We can get this done, in April or May maybe, But I don't see them really going a long time. That would hurt. So at some point, you just kind of have to make the tough decision, put the franchise on him, because you want that guy in camp. You want him participating in everything.
Getting it done early is important. And let's not forget that the Brees situation dragged on so long that ultimately I do think his performance suffered.
I agree with you, Ken.
He had no offseason, and in addition to that, he didn't have his alter ego and his coach. So I think those two factors conspired to produce a less than brilliant season, which we're accustomed to seeing, and then he returned to having an outstanding season this past season. So I do think it's important, as Terrence mentioned, to try to get it done as soon as possible, one way or the other.
And Kenny, if I can add this, I mean, from their standpoint, because they are up against the cap, no matter what the cap ends up as, okay?
Right.
It's in their best interest to get a cap-friendly deal, to be able to take the majority of that money, push it toward the back of the contract, as they're trying to do with a lot of their veterans right now. So they have the ability to go out and get that corner back. They have the ability to maybe fill some holes in free agency and not have to maybe take the leftovers down the line when maybe they get a deal done. I can't foresee them getting the hometown deal like they did with Keenan Lewis. You're not going to really find that out there from a lot of players. They want to get paid now. They want to make sure that money's there. And they are in a situation where, they may not be able to be real big players in free agency. I know that a lot of people are thinking, well, Victor Butler's maybe your big free agent this year because he didn't get to play, but you really can't go by that. I mean, at this point, you have some needs that have to be filled, and you have a limited amount of dollars to be able to fill those. And we haven't even talked about trying to re-sign some of the guys that obviously are free agents, going to be free agents on the market. So we'll see what's going to happen there. Speaking of that, Zach Strief, to me, looks like he is going to be the biggest attraction to other teams going forward. Solid right tackle. This is his last contract. He has said that he would love to stay in New Orleans, but I got a feeling that he may price himself out of the market here with the Saints. Kenny, your thoughts?
Well, he loves the team. He loves Breeze, loves the team. He's a captain, and they've given him every opportunity here, but obviously you only get one pay cycle to maximize your ability as a player. And you don't know if tomorrow's going to be your last game. So as a result, it would not surprise me at all that if he got a better offer, he'd be gone. And of course, there's precedent. All we have to do is look at this regime and what's happened with their offensive linemen from the time they got here. It started off back in 2005, with LaCharles Bentley, and then ultimately with Brown, and then of course moving forward with the two centers, and Jeff Fain, and followed by Jonathan Goodwin, and then of course with Carl Nix and Jermon Bushrod. They have consistently shown you that they feel like this is a position or a specific area of a team that they can fill by replacing people rather than paying people. The only guy they've invested in is Jari Evans, and they chose him over Nix because of dependability and character. And Nix had some issues coming out of college. He talks a lot, and unfortunately in Tampa he's been hurt. The guy's a special player, but I think you're right that ultimately that would be a concern. And Strief's a leader. He's not a great player, but he's a dependable player and a guy that Breeze likes and counts on, and he's a leader in the locker room as well. Yeah.
Now, I've been shocked at just kind of how Sean Payton doesn't really, put a lot of value and continuity up front. I mean, and how important that is. And we saw with that kind of, it hurt him big time. So, I mean, I'm looking at a guy like Strief, and I'm saying, you need to pony up some way, somehow. But if you don't, Strief is, like you said, he's smart. He would be smart to move on. I mean, because in this league, it's a thankless league. So get your money while you can. I mean, don't play around. Don't sit around and be loyal to a guy. Or to a team because you're loyal to a team, and you see what happens. I mean, you get hurt, you get cut. I mean, and so it happens every year. We see it all of the time. So no, I mean, Strief is I wouldn't say he's a pretty good right tackle. He'll command a lot of money on the free agent market.
Well, one of the top right tackles out there right now in free agency, and Terrence, you touched on something I've talked about in the past. I almost think there's got to be a change of philosophy now with the Saints, considering Breeze's age.
Yes.
That again, you may have to start putting a little bit of money into an offensive line and trying to get better. Although the Saints have had a history of being able to go into those middle rounds, get those diamonds in the rough, groom those diamonds in the rough, and allow them to come in. They play themselves into a great contract. The only problem is that great contract is usually with another team.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, like this year, I mean, you take a rookie left tackle who played, not a high level of college football. I mean, and you put him out at left tackle, and you ask him to protect Drew Brees' blind side during the toughest part of the season. I mean, that was just, that was almost insane. I mean, and it really did hurt him. It hurt him at times, and so I mean, you can't afford to keep playing that game, gambling in that way. You have to really look at that offensive line and take care of some guys.
It played a large role in costing them the most important game of the season.
Yes.
At Carolina.
Yes.
That game meant everything. Yeah. That meant a number 2 seed, a division championship, and a bye. And that's your ticket to getting to the NFC Championship game. And his inability to block in that game, not his fault at all. And by the way, he improved incrementally.
Every game.
And the guy's a good athlete.
Yes.
He's got a chance to be a good player.
I would agree with that.
But Terrence is right. We don't know that yet.
Yeah.
We see the ability, but we don't know about the productivity on a long-term basis.
And I'm sure that Drew Brees didn't really want to find that out this season, whether he was going to be a great player. I mean, I think that in 2-3 years, yeah, he should be a phenomenal player, probably. I mean, because he's a great special athlete. But I mean, there's still so many nuances about the game, and to put him in those situations where you're going against, a couple of the best rush guys out there. I mean, come on. I mean, what did you expect from this guy in that Carolina game? It was an impossible situation, and you put everyone at risk, including Drew Brees.
Yes, they did. Brother De La Puente is also an unrestricted free agent. Again, the Saints have, in the past, have shown that they don't want to pay their centers, let Jonathan Goodwin get away. I don't think this offensive line has been the same since Jonathan Goodwin has gotten away. I think that they need to go with a bigger center. I've always felt that way, especially because of Drew Brees' stature, his ability to climb the pocket. I've mentioned it many times at risk of being redundant on this show or my radio show. How many times have we seen in the recent past Brees on his tippy toes trying to look over defensive linemen? And if you think back in your mind's eye when it was Nix and it was Goodwin and it was Jari Evans, that hole opening up in the middle allowing him to climb that ladder almost unscathed. Kenny, is De La Puente a guy that needs to come back, or is Tim Alito the heir apparent there? A guy that's a little bit bigger, but of course he is a raw guy that's really never played the center position for this team.
Yeah, that's it. We don't know if he's capable of handling that. De La Puente's a smart guy. He makes line calls. He's just somewhat limited physically. I think you nailed it. And there are some matchups where he's a bit overmatched. And you'd like to have a better player, but you have to have a better player before you cast him aside. I'm not sure they have that. And they've tried to deal with that position. Let's keep in mind that they had Jeff Fain, who left for free agency before they had Goodwin, who left for free agency. Then they bring the veteran in from the Bears, who quits after 2 or 3 games, and that's how De La Puente ends up on the field. So, again, this was, and by the way, they drafted Matt Tennant with the idea of him being their center of the future, and it didn't work. He wasn't good enough. So it's not as though they haven't tried there. But to answer the question, I think it's dollars and cents. If you can keep him inexpensively, then you keep him, and you worry about it later. And if you cannot, is he worth paying? I don't think so.
Yeah, and I have a feeling that that he probably won't command the type of money that he probably thinks he can get on the open market. So with that being said, I mean, I think that they have a good chance of being able to keep their center. I mean, but is he going to be the long-term solution? I don't know. But once again, Drew Brees is getting older. And you want to keep this line. You want to keep as many experienced guys who know each other and they know how he plays and what you need to do to keep him protected. You want to keep those. You want to keep as many of those guys around him as possible. You really don't want to be messing with that right around now. The
line, obviously, very porous in the beginning of the season. Toward the end of the season, they played better, much better as a unit. They got better. But I don't think any Saint fans like seeing Brees get hit as much as he did. And I don't know, again, as he starts to get into the twilight of his career, if he'll be able to handle those type of hits on a week in, week out. It's got to be a priority for this team going forward to make sure that they've got the guys in place to protect Drew Brees.
Considering the fact that they did not have an elite wide receiver.
Yes. And
they had this offensive line, and how many times Brees got hit this year? This was as good a year as he's had.
You're right.
When you consider all those factors and you factor them in. Now, road games, we heard that all year long, and there's truth to that. But then again, nobody's as good on the road as they are at home. So that gets overplayed to a degree. At the same time, the reason, or a primary reason they weren't nearly as good on the road was the offensive line in particular. They got manhandled by the Jets. Let's not forget that game. That was a killer. Ditto with St. Louis. These are the 2 games that, in my mind, kill their season because those are games you're favored in. And it's a real simple game, guys. If you're supposed to win the game, regardless of where it's being played, you have to win those games.
Yes.
It's one of the things the Moro regime was good at. They always beat the teams they were supposed to beat. They just couldn't beat the ones they weren't supposed to beat.
Right. Considering the San Francisco 49ers was the main one.
They came around, and they came along at the wrong time. Really I still maintain to this day that had the Saints been in the AFC in the 1980s and early 1990s, they'd have gotten to a Super Bowl.
They'd have been the Buffalo.
They had a 17-game win streak against the AFC. And they came along at a time where the 49ers were a dynasty. The Redskins were a dynasty. The New York Giants under Bill Parcells were a dynastic team. And on the back end, the Dallas Cowboys were beginning their dynasty. So you're in a conference with not just winning teams, but great teams. The kind of teams that would be the best teams today.
Yes.
Although you can't compare eras.
Right, and I think when it was the Bills made it 3 times during that era.
Bills and the Denver Broncos,
Right.
who made it 4 times. And when the Broncos were coming off of a Super Bowl appearance, Saints beat them 42-0 in the Dome in a regular season with Elway.
We're going to take our break. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Great panel for you tonight here on WLAE TV. Kenny Trahan of SportsNOLA.com and also WHNO TV and WGSO Radio. Terrence Harris of NOLA.com. Stay tuned. We'll be right back talking more sports here on Inside New Orleans Sports.
My name's Reggie. Just recently, my wife and I took in her sister's children. Now, we already had 4, so I went from becoming a family man to a man with a bigger family. Now, you can't eat love, so I don't know how I'm gonna feed them tonight. How was that, Reg?
I think I look more like Denzel.
That's cold, man.
Play a role in ending hunger. Visit feedingamerica.org/hunger and find your local food bank.
Packers. Viking. Packers. Viking. Viking.
Red state, blue state, vegan.
Carnivore.
We come from different places.
Uptown.
Downtown.
Optimist.
We come to different conclusions.
Half empty.
Half full.
But when we live united, we create real, lasting change in the building blocks of life. The education, income, and health of our communities,
Live
our families,
united.
even the person next to us.
Live united.
Real change won't happen without you. So give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Sign up at liveunited.org.
You're watching WLAE, New Orleans Public Television. Find us on Cox Channel 14, Charter Channel 11 and 711, AT&T Channel 32 and 1032, Dish TV, Direct TV, and over-the-air broadcast on Channel 32.
Know what?
What?
Since I got adopted, I've learned a lot about these humans.
I know. I mean, check out these two. It's Flirt City over here.
Yeah, I noticed that. It looks like my human is definitely into your human.
Oh, look. I think she's getting his number.
Nice.
Your human's got some sweet moves.
Takes after his dog. Oh, look, they're doing that thing where they put their arms around each other.
She kicked up a leg. It's like in the movies.
That's awesome. Looks like we're going to be hanging out a little bit more.
Hi, we're Ola High, and you're watching WLAE TV.
In the search for beautiful people, music that moves, and real culture, America, there's only one LA Coast. Go Coast, Louisiana delivers the treasures of the Gulf, fresh to you.
I think we need a bigger boat.
Sundays at 8:30 p.m. on LAE.
Welcome back. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Each and every Thursday night right here on WLAE TV at 6 o'clock with a rebroadcast every Friday night, 10 o'clock on WLAE TV and Pelican Sports Television in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette. Got a great panel for you tonight. Ken Trahan of SportsNOLA.com and Terrence Harris of NOLA.com. We're talking Saints. We'll be going to Pelicans in just a moment. Guys, a lot being made about what's going to happen in the draft. Very heavy draft when it comes to the wide receiver position. Obviously, it's a need for the Saints. Offensive linemen, the problem with the Saints is they've always drafted so late in the first round. It's hard to get a real quality offensive lineman. I think it's one of the reasons why they've looked to the middle rounds. Cornerback, depending on what's going to happen with Malcolm Jenkins, maybe a safety there. Kenny, not knowing what's going to happen in free agency and just assuming they're not going to be able to go out and make a splash, what do you think the needs are when it comes to that? When it comes to the draft, is it best player available, or will this be one of those years where they may target a need?
I think it's best player available. I think it always has to be that way until you get to that pick and you see what's out there, and then you check the tea leaves and see what other people are looking to do. But you have to factor in all of those things. It's so easy to just say, take the best guy. It's so easy to just say, we have a need here, so let's take a guy there. Ultimately, you have to consider who's picking ahead of me, who's picking behind me, what are my primary competition going to do, and what do I have to do to combat that? So there's so much that goes on. But as I said earlier, I think a cornerback is very important to this football team at this stage. A wide receiver certainly would be welcome. An outside linebacker, clearly. And depending on what you decide you want to do with Malcolm Jenkins, maybe even a safety. Raphael Bush is going to be re-signed at a higher price. He can play. And Kenny Vaccaro, we know what he can do. They're making the transition, as you suggested earlier, in that area. They don't have to touch their defensive line. They're in good shape there. Across the board, they have a decision to make with Bunkley. But I think the positions I just mentioned probably would be the ones to look at.
And I mean, I look at it, the draft is so deep at wide receiver. I mean, I just feel like, I mean, maybe that's where you want to go. You want to see, I mean, what you have available there. I mean, but to me, I think you also have to, it's a kind of tricky balance between need and best player available. I mean, if the best player available is a defensive lineman, like you just said, I mean, that's not a need right now. Would you go with him just because?
Well, you trade out of the pick.
Yeah, maybe you trade out of the pick. I mean, if
pick up extra picks.
New England has taught everyone a lesson in that regard.
Yes, they have. I mean, and so maybe that's what you do. But I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking if there's one of those big time quality receivers still sitting there at that point, you may need to go ahead and take a shot at him, or maybe a dynamic cornerback. I mean, as Ken said, I mean that is definitely a need right now.
No doubt. I think if you had your druthers, you'd probably want to get a veteran corner to come in and not have to go with obviously somebody you have to groom. We've seen that with Patrick Robinson, seen that with Corey White. There's some growing pains there. As I think you mentioned a little bit earlier, Corey White, also Patrick Robinson, a guy that the jury's still out on. You look at what Robinson's projected to make. He might be a guy that honestly could be a cap casualty before it's all said and done.
Especially with the injury.
May not be on this team before it's all said and done. And he was a first-round pick.
Correct.
So, we'll see what happens there. But, some have even talked about a linebacker with speed that can get to the edge. Hawthorne played well last year. I feel they can upgrade that position. It really depends on who's going to follow there. But, I think that all those positions, when you look at them, are positions of need for this team. And, there's somebody that if they can get the right guy that can fit this organization, it's somebody that can come in and they've already proven they're not afraid to play young guys if they're ready to go. One of the enigmas for the wide receiver position right now is Nick Toon. What is Nick Toon an NFL player? Is he going to develop into the guy they thought he was going to be? And I think that will tell the tale a lot of where they go ultimately at the wide receiver position.
I think they have a better handle on that than we do, frankly, because Nick Toon, when he got the opportunity in that game I mentioned against the Jets, was awful and was clearly a factor in them losing the football game. But he's big. There is some ability there. And as I mentioned before with regard to wide receiver, with Morgan, you might feel like you've got a guy or guys that can play in this league already on the team there, whereas at cornerback, you don't really know that.
That's right.
You mentioned Corey getting out there on defense, and he got exposed.
Yes.
Okay? We saw he wasn't ready to be a 2 or a 3. Really, he's a dime guy, is what you're looking at.
Yes.
So as a result, you have a definitive need there more so than wide receiver.
Yeah. I mean, I might disagree just a little bit. I mean, but I also still want to see a little bit more from Nick Toon. I mean, because he is such a great-looking athlete. I mean, and he has a lot of the physical tools. I mean, and he's so slick with his running style. I mean, here's a guy, but I think you have to be able to live with some of his mistakes, and clearly that's not Sean Payton. I mean, you make some mistakes and then you get put on the back burner for a while. I mean, but I think that he's a guy who I'd like to see maybe get a little more opportunity especially during the preseason, early in the next season, to see what he can do, because he could be that game-changing type receiver. We don't really know that yet. I mean, Kenny Stills was also kind of impressive as well.
Good player.
Very good player. I mean, so anything. So Joe Morgan. I mean, if he comes back and he can come back from that injury, I mean, maybe they do have some guys there. I'm not real sure yet, and that's why I'm saying. But if you have a game-breaking type receiver that's sitting there in the draft, maybe you do want to go ahead and take him, because you have so many unknowns. I mean, there's a lot of ifs, ands, maybes in those, at the receiver position, but no guy that you can just really say, something, and next season he's going to take off and be the guy for them.
Interesting stat too. The Saints haven't made their full allotment of selections since 2007. So last year they made 7 picks in the draft. So they have not had that full allotment for various reasons, via trades, of course, the penalties through Bountygate and so forth, and you just make your living through the draft. They've done a remarkable job in mid to late rounds. They've done an incredible job with undrafted free agents, but you make your living by having those picks at the top end and having them come through for you. Yeah. And again, that's important. I do think that in the second round, there will be some good wide receivers available because, as Terrence alluded to, this is a really deep draft for wide receivers.
You know, Kenny, I agree, and you look at where the Saints have drafted as well. I mean, you're looking at that for the majority of the time Peyton has been here, the back end of the first round, the back end of every round. I mean, it's only been a couple times he's been here where they've been kind of in the middle or early. So, you know, they've been able to really capitalize on some guys that, you know, have come in and played for him. And, you know, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I still believe you upgrade the wide receiver position, all of a sudden Jimmy Graham is a better player. You're not able to double team him if you've got multiple threats that are out there. And also when you're looking at that wide receiver, you know, you may be looking at a guy that can do multiple disciplines, a guy that can ultimately return kicks and punts for you, that can play that special teams, especially with Sproles kind of slowing down. So I think that's something they're going to be looking at in the draft when they look at the wide receiver position as well.
Well, Odell Beckham Jr. is a guy whose stock is rising, unfortunately.
He may not be.
Right. He'd be an ideal guy. He's not as big as you'd like. He's about 5'10 and a half, 5'11. I think he measured over 5'11, though, at the Combine. Yeah. And he's smooth. And when he was at Newman, I did some of his games, and I told people then, he's fluid, he's smooth, he's deceptive. He's going to be a really good college player. There were some people that clearly doubted that. Fortunately, I was proved to be right in that particular instance.
I like Jarvis Landry as well. I mean, I think one of the things. You know, Jarvis Landry is a guy that probably will go second, third round, but is a guy that I think, and Kenny, you and Terrence remember this, was a phenom on special teams. I mean, so much so he was such a great tackle on special teams that there was a thought process that maybe he could even play the defensive side of the ball. He's a guy that, again, when you bring him in, ultimately he could come in and maybe play a little receiver for you, but it could be a guy also that could help you on special teams immediately.
Right. And I mean, and that's obviously a huge need at this point. I mean, like you said, with Sproles showing some signs of decline, I mean, maybe you want a guy who can come in and help you instantly and make the roster there. I mean, but you know, like I said, that part will be interesting. I mean, I just don't know yet. I mean, what the thinking really is, but I mean, you know, a receiver is, I mean, it's a need. It's a need. I mean, and whether you address it in the second round or third round, you have to go ahead and try to make a move to improve that spot.
Boy, as successful as the Saints have been, the Pelicans are kind of an enigma. They, a lot of expectations that they would be in the playoff hunt in the very, very tough West. Maybe those expectations a little bit out of whack. The youngest team in the NBA right now, but a team that's been beset by injuries. A lot of people are talking. They want Monty Williams gone. They want Dell Demps gone tomorrow. Well, we'll start the conversation off with again, and with Terrence, we'll start with you. Your thoughts on Monty Williams, how Monty Williams has performed as a coach here, and because of everything that's happened between change in ownership, the NBA, the Chris Paul deal, now again, finally putting a team together that you thought may make a playoff run, and all the injuries they've had to deal with. Monty Williams gets a little bit of a pass this year. Should he be on the hot seat?
No, he shouldn't. I mean, I think that Monty's a good coach, and I think he's a good young coach who's still developing. I mean, he's going to get better. I mean, but he needs a team. I mean, I thought that what Dale did this past summer, I thought, bringing in Tyreek, bringing in Drew, I thought that those moves, really kind of elevated them to a point where they could maybe make a push for a 7th, 8th seed. But when you have the injuries, I mean, Ryan Anderson's missing, Drew's missing, and Smith is missing. So you're missing 3 players who should arguably be starting for you. And so when no team, I don't care who you are, can afford to lose 3 starters and still be in contention. And when you take a team that's this young, with this, even with Anthony Davis doing what he's doing, I mean, it's just no way to really judge, to really thoroughly judge him. I think that, we need to give him at least another season to kind of see where he's at. I mean, I think that Monty really is. He's a good coach, I think, and I think some of the criticism is a little bit too harsh at this point in my mind.
Kenny?
Well, anyone that would insinuate that Jason Smith's a starter in the NBA has no idea what they're looking at. He's an 8th or 9th guy on any team. So if you go into a season and he's your starter at center, you haven't done a very good job of evaluating. I think the blame lies more with the front office than with the coaching staff. They overpaid dramatically for Tyreek Evans. He's top 50 paid player in this league. He's not even a star, and he can't throw it in the ocean from 15 feet, much less 12 feet. He's good at driving in the hole. He's shooting 40% this year from the field, and that's a guy that doesn't shoot the ball from the perimeter very much at all. Not well spent money at all. Eric Gordon was a very poor move on their part. They had every opportunity to do a sign and trade and get him out of here and did not do it. He's the third option at best on a good team. He's a shooter. He's a liability defensively. He doesn't get to the basket very much, and he can't close. We have definitive proof of what you have there. He's not a bad player. He's just not worth the kind of money we're talking about. When you max your money out on guys like Tyreke Evans and Eric Gordon, you're not going anywhere. You're a 500 team at best with Anderson. You're a 500 team at best with Holiday, who, make no mistake about it, he's no great player. He's a solid player. Philadelphia didn't think he was that good, and they replaced him very easily. And as for Ryan Anderson, he's a good player. But again, he's a third option guy. He's a shooter. You know, that's what he is. On a good team, that's where you need to be. Monty Williams, I agree with what was said. I think the jury's out on Monty. 5 years is a long time, but these have been difficult circumstances. On the front end, losing Chris Paul and David West. Yes. On the back end, having all these injuries, and ultimately he has to play with the deck he's handed. But I will say that I'm sure he had a lot to do with personnel moves, and he stood behind Eric Gordon at a time when everybody else was saying, move the guy. And I hate to say I told you so, but at this point in time, now you'll have a hard time moving him because he makes too much money.
Yes.
And he's not that good. So this is what you're left with. It's a 500 team. Do they have a chance to get better? Yes, because, as Terrence said, they're a younger team. Mm-hmm. How much better? I'm not sure a whole lot better. Anthony Davis is phenomenal. He's a tremendous piece. What a great young man. And what a terrific player he already is. And he's only going to get better. Yes. Mm-hmm. But you need to have the pieces around him to have him here in 3 years. Otherwise, he's gone.
Agreed. Yeah. So do you think that by the All-Star break next year, if this thing has not been turned around, that we may see a change in the coaching staff and with Monty Williams? Do you think ultimately that Mickey Loomis and Tom Benson looks at Dell Demps and agrees with you and says, look, we've overpaid for some guys that are really not up to snuff and have kind of put us kind of in cap hell? Can these two guys survive? Will they be here at the start of next season, at the start of the following season?
They're result-oriented. They bought this team to win. They're spending a lot of money. They built a facility that's second to none, and they expect to win. And they're not going to be very patient about it. So is there a chance for change? Yes, there's a definitive chance for change, whether it's deserved or not. Yeah. I think that's certainly a possibility, given the circumstances. They want results, and those results have to be in the stands as well, as you mentioned earlier, and we're not seeing that. Yeah. You know, you got the naming rights, you got the All-Star game, you got this unbelievable practice facility, you got a training table like nobody has, sharing with an NFL team. It doesn't get any better than that. And the injuries aside, as I said before, with those guys in place, how good are they really? I think they're a 500 type of team. I don't see them being any better than that. I watched them play when they had those guys, and what I saw was a team that could compete with the bottom-end teams in the playoff hunt in the Western Conference, which, by the way, is really good. Much like the Saints discussion earlier, right. If they were in the East, they'd be in the playoffs.
Exactly. I mean, and you have to start somewhere, too. I mean, so that they, I mean, you don't expect them to come out the box and be able to compete against the elite teams in the West. I mean, so you're looking at the bottom rung teams and you're wanting to figure out, can they, where do they fit there? I mean, I thought that, in the best case scenario, they were probably a 7th or 8th type seed team anyways. I mean, I don't think they're coming into, I mean, that was their best case scenario coming into the season, and now we kind of see that probably isn't going to happen. Now, as far as some of the changes, I mean, now I said that I don't think Monty should be fired, but I think that some changes could be made at the end of this season. I mean, really, when you look at some of the decisions that have been made.
You're talking about with Dell Demps?
Well, yes, with Dell. I mean, because and some of the results. I mean, the results just aren't there. I mean, he's made some moves, and I respect what he tried to do last summer. I mean, with Tyreke and Drew. I mean,
They're trying to win.
He was trying to win, and he made some aggressive moves. We can sit here and debate all day long whether or not, those guys were worth some of the moves he made. You look at even the Eric Gordon situation. I think the teams are sometimes in a tough spot when, like you have a Phoenix that kind of shows up and says, hey, we're going to pay you, we're willing to pay you all of this money.
We're going to max you out.
Yeah, so now, and if these guys don't step up and match that, then they kind of look cheap. They look like they're not serious. So I think that maybe they were in a tough spot in that decision. So I don't know. I mean, I think that he's tried, but I mean, it just hasn't worked. And as you guys said, I mean, this is a result-oriented business. And I mean, so the results right there. I mean, Dell's given it. I mean, I don't think that Dell's been sitting back and not doing his homework and not doing what he needs to do. It's just that his decisions haven't worked out, and somebody ultimately has to pay the price for that. So I think that, I mean, it would not surprise me if we did see a move at the end of this season. I mean, I think that they'll make some changes just because you have to.
Sometimes you have to be lucky too. Phoenix is 10 games over 500 right now, with a candidate for Coach of the Year, with Morris, who's playing great, Dragic, who's really done a very good job, and they wanted this guy and wanted to pay him that kind of money, so go figure.
And again, look, when you look at it from their standpoint, I can understand the transition of the franchise, losing Chris Paul, wanting to get something back for Chris Paul, not wanting to let the centerpiece of that trade go. But I think a lot of us that were sitting here in the New Orleans media were looking at again, his attitude, not wanting to be here, saying the comments that he made about Phoenix, looking at him as a player, looking at him saying, well, he doesn't look like a max guy to me, okay, and then max him out. You know, in this market right now in basketball, there's no doubt, if in most cases, you're going to have to overpay for a free agent to get him here.
Right.
In this case, these were trades or matching offers where you've overpaid. You've overpaid a little bit for Drew Holiday. You've overpaid for Tyreek Evans. You've overpaid for Eric Gordon. The problem is, if you find out that these guys are not going to work with the nucleus you have, are you able to move them? I think we've seen in this last, leading up to the All-Star break at the trading deadline, they were impossible to move. Eric Gordon may be able to be moved next season because, again, we're hearing that he's going to opt out of that $15 million deal in the last year. I'll believe it when I see a player walk away from $15 million. He thinks he can get a long-term deal, maybe 4 years, and kind of max that out. Not a max deal, but maybe $10 million a year, getting $40 million instead of $15. God bless him if he thinks he can. But they are in a situation now where they got a lot of pieces, but pieces that don't look like they're meshing right now. It's hard to judge them because they haven't been on the court a lot together. But at the same time, if you do break this up, it's going to be difficult for you to move these guys because of what you're paying them.
Yeah. I mean, I just look at this team, and what I keep asking myself is, where's the trade? I mean, who has the best trade value to be able to make some moves to improve your team? And I think one of the guys that probably has the best and the most trade value, and he's kind of complex for them, and that's Ryan Anderson, because you don't really want to give up what Ryan brings to the table. I mean, he's an outside shooter who can, who can tear it up from
$8 million a year.
Yeah,
not a bad contract.
Not
but
a
the problem with him is now with the herniated disc that he has, you don't know if he'll ever be the same player again. You don't know really till he gets on the court next season if he's going to be a guy that can be the same type of player that he was. So you're in a tough spot there as well. Get it?
Well, he's a stretch four, and the problem is Anthony Davis is your four. So are you going to invest that kind of money in two guys at that position? I don't want to see Ryan Anderson leave. I don't think anybody does. The whole locker room loves him. The coaches love him. He's a great shooter. He's a 6'10" shooter, but he plays a position where you have a franchise player.
Exactly.
And can you truly invest that much money in one position? Because if they're both on the floor at the same time, you're going to have a problem on the other end of the floor, which, by the way, is their biggest problem anyway. They can't guard me.
They can't guard anybody.
No, that's the biggest problem.
And let me say this. They knew that coming out of last year. That was a problem with Vasquez. It was a problem with Lopez. Lopez would look awfully good in a Pelicans uniform right now. He's a lot better than any of their centers, although he's a little bit lead-footed. And in the case of Vasquez, he couldn't guard anybody quick, but really, at that price, was that such a bad thing to have on your team either? So the point is, they had guys that couldn't guard last year. They still can't guard this year, and they have a coach who professes being defense, defense, defense. Well, if that's the case, why aren't you imposing your philosophy in terms of the type of players that you bring in to this organization? Or is your general manager simply not accommodating those needs?
Right. I mean, maybe that's a situation where maybe him and Dale just aren't on the same page for whatever reason, and that Dale is just spending time around him, he's a pretty strong-minded guy who feels like he knows what he needs to know, and so I think that that may be the problem there, is that those two guys just aren't on the same page. Clearly, they need a post player. And
they need a three.
Desperately.
How could you go into the season after knowing what you know, and you got Al-Farouq Aminu as your starting three? He can play in the NBA, but he's never going to be a starter for anybody else.
Right.
I said that before, that Evans couldn't throw in the ocean. He can't throw in the ocean from 7
It's their
feet.
biggest need in the offseason.
I mean, you can't start him in the NBA.
You got to get a three, but you also need a post.
Absolutely.
You got to get a post. And that's why, I think that, like you touched on a little bit earlier, having Ryan and having Anthony at the same position last year, I think it also kind of slowed Anthony's development a little bit. And I think one of the things that's been sort of a blessing in disguise with Ryan being out, we've had a chance to really see Anthony grow. I don't know that we would have seen as much growth out of Anthony if Ryan's still healthy, because you really can't play those two guys together. But I think it's just a complicated, situation for them that they have to make a hard decision on, what do you do with Ryan, especially once he's healthy? I mean, because I think that he does have some trade value because of his three-point shooting ability if the herniated disc is what
and his contract.
Correct. Unlike the other two guys we spoke of, he's a more attractive commodity because of that.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm of the opinion, guys, that eventually Anthony Davis is your center. Do you guys agree or disagree with that?
No.
You think he stays at the 4?
He's a 4.
He's a 4. I mean, and if you try to put him at the center, I mean, he's just not physically strong enough for that. No, I mean, he is a 4. I mean, so no, that would be a huge mistake to put him at the post.
Agreed.
Also, when you look at this team, I think on paper, this team looked great going into this season. When you looked at all the pieces, talking about playing an up-tempo game, I just think that it hasn't translated from paper to on the court. Even when they were healthy, they were still trying to adjust to each other. The question is, can they make the moves in the offseason to maybe cover some of the mistakes that they've made up to this point?
Well, you've got to have better overall players. I didn't think they made great moves. I didn't think they were a great team. I thought they were an average team. If you look at Houston, everybody wants to talk about going out and getting Harden and getting Howard. Well, you've got a bona fide 1 and 2 option there.
Yes.
But look at the guys around them. Look at the way Chandler Parsons has played. Look at the way Patterson has played. They've got guys that are better than anybody at those positions that the Pelicans have, and they're no better than 4th options on that team. That's what a really good team looks like. And they're playing really well right now, by the way.
Yes, they are, definitely. I mean, like I said, I thought that the moves were he made some bold moves, and I think he needed to make some moves in the offseason. Maybe those, as we're looking now, we know clearly those weren't necessarily the right moves. But I think that what Dale was trying to do was he was trying to improve this team because he wanted to make a run at the playoffs this season, and I think he kind of felt like this was the year for him and Monty, and so I think he pushed the Saints ownership or the Saints Pelicans ownership to allow them to make some of those more aggressive moves. They just haven't worked out for them. But I mean, I didn't look at this team ever and think, okay, this is a 4 or 5 seed. No. I thought that this was a team that, if they 7th or 8th seed, if they did that this year, kind of like baby steps. I mean, and you're building with Anthony Davis getting better and better and better, so that maybe in 3 years from now, when it's time for Anthony to start looking around and thinking about his future, he looks at this situation and says, you know something, I want to build it. I want to plant it right here. Yes. That's what you want.
No doubt.
Much like Durant in Oklahoma City.
Yes.
Not a destination location, maybe the worst arena in the league, and he's a keeper because they've got a team that plays for championships.
Yes.
For sure.
And guys, in the offseason,
and a good coach too.
Philly's going to have their first pick. It would take a remarkable roll of the ping pong balls to allow that to happen, to allow the Pelicans to get into the top 5. Other than that, this team is cash strapped, so they don't have a lot of money. So you heard Dell Demps recently say that these guys are all commodities that he may be looking to move. So with about a minute left, do you see this team being very, very aggressive in the offseason, maybe moving some of these pieces that were supposed to be the nucleus to try to get better? Kenny, we'll take you first.
Well, they had a chance. I mean, Morrow and Roberts are expiring guys. You could have done something there. They didn't do it. And as we talked about before with Gordon and Evans, the problem is who's going to take those contracts, again, for what the productivity is and what the projection is down the road. So I think they kind of did it to themselves because they didn't have pieces they could trade. And as Terrence mentioned, maybe their best option to trade is Ryan Anderson, and that's not going to happen right now. So will they make moves once the season's over? Yeah, like they did last year. I suspect they will. They jettisoned 2 starters. Didn't work out that well.
Got about 15 seconds.
Well, I mean, I agree, Ken. I mean, I think that, you look at this, I don't see a whole lot of flexibility. I mean, I think that they kind of got to live with these guys to some degree and hope that some help comes through the draft. I mean, and the post and the 3, that's what they need to address.
Guys, thanks so much for being with us tonight here on Inside New Orleans Sports. Ken Trahan of SportsNola.com, Terrence Harris of NOLA.com, and Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there is a rebroadcast of this show each and every Friday night right here on WLAE TV at 10 o'clock with a rebroadcast on Pelican Sports Television, again, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette. You can also catch me on the radio, 9:90 a.m. WGSO, 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. weekdays. If you've missed any of the previous episodes of this program, you can catch those at ericasher.com, where you can also download the podcast of my radio show. Special thanks to the WLAE production staff, Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Donovan Joseph, Kenny Juneau, my producer-director, William Hill. For Kenny Trahan, for Terrence Harris, my name is Eric Asher. Have a happy Mardi Gras, and we'll see you right back here on Thursday night for Inside New Orleans Sports. Good evening.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by the Union Capital Corporation and Natel's Air Conditioning and Heating, a proud sponsor of the St. Jude Dream Home.